scary version of Brad Pitt. You can see that from Benjamin Button. Excellent. So that's what you're in for today, is my 12-step Benjamin Button blueprint. What I've used to, and I actually have the scans to prove it, reverse my chronological biological age by 10 plus years. And I'm going to share those strategies with you tonight. Days at Bird River. I like it. At the lake. Nice. All right. So should be exciting. Should be roughly 30 to 45 minutes, depending on questions. And lots of value here. So try to be present. Try to put away those other screens and tabs, because you won't get a whole lot out of it if you're distracted. But I promise you full value for your time and investment here. Again, the bonus I mentioned is a little bit of a mini training on how to avoid summer weight gain over the next 6-8 weeks without giving up the beers or brats. That's the important part. So I promise to share some drink recommendations, because I know people are going to drink, even though I suggest moderating that. How much to eat to maintain or even lose. Okay, so that stay tuned for that. It'll be at the end. But first, 12 steps to slow down aging. Father Time comes to us all. We all realize we're not getting out of here alive, but we want to do it in a way that we live as long as possible, but also as well as possible. I think that's what gets lost, is the quality of life. Research shows like people, as soon as they hit 60, the things they want to do, a lot of them they can no longer do because of some physical or cognitive limitation. And so the last thing you want to do is get to retirement, have 20 plus years to enjoy, and you're so limited by your limitations. And we want to eliminate those, or at least greatly reduce them. So first up, you may have heard of the Four Horsemen. I think it was a show back in the day, but we've narrowed it down to 4 horsemen of common disease that tend to come to get us all. We want to push the timelines back on any risk factors to these as long as possible. And those are long-winded slide here, but I'm sure you're all familiar with them. Anything to do with the heart, cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, pass out in your garage one day face down. We don't want that. Often caused by a buildup of fast cholesterol in the artery walls, so blood flow is restricted, where that leads. Cancer, of course. We have lots of fitness buffs in the cancer world, unfortunately, but we also know the preventable causes of cancer being our body fat, obesity, alcohol certainly is linked there when it's drank to excess. And I'm forgetting the third one, smoking. There you go. Those are the big 3 certainly you want to focus on. We'll talk about how to limit your risk factors as best you can. Anything to do with the brain, neurodegenerative, it's a big word, diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, they all get lumped in there. And certainly there's a genetic component to that. You can get tested, see if you've got I think it's the APOB4. Is that the one? I confuse the two between that and metabolic disease, but that's linked to a higher risk factor for dementia. So certainly if you have one or both of those, you want to do all you can to slow the progression of that. And the last one, which more what I specialize in, is metabolic disease. So like insulin sensitivity, which leads to type 2 diabetes, weight gain, metabolic syndrome, all that fun stuff. So if you do what we share in today's presentation, you'll largely check all these boxes, put yourself in the best possible position to limit your risk. Because ultimately, this is the worst case scenario. Someone who's got a ton of life to live has that random cardiovascular event, maybe doesn't live to tell the story, right? Bill Burr, if you saw him speak on Saturday at the Comedy Fest, he was kind of making light of it, but he's in that age where friends just kind of drop dead between, I think it was like 49 and 61 was his range. I don't know where he got that math, but we don't want this fate. Obviously, there are genetic, anomalies that something happens, a brain aneurysm, boom. But there are things we can do to hopefully avoid this. And I often tell the story of gentlemen who reached out through Facebook, through the proper channels about coaching, was sort of on the fence, and he was prioritizing his business at the time, and full merit to him. That's what he was putting first, but he also had a weight issue that he was trying to push the timelines back on. And sure enough, I see a post on his actual personal Facebook from his wife sharing that he had passed away on their bathroom floor, leaving behind 3 daughters. I think they're probably young teenagers now. This was years ago. But that's why I do what I do ultimately, is to help avoid as many of those scenarios as possible. Daughters without fathers, right? this is what it's about ultimately, though, is living gracefully, not just living longer, although we want to accomplish both. And they certainly aren't competing goals. And that's what we're going to get into now. Okay, so this is the definitely matter section. We're going to get into might matter, murky science afterwards, but definitely matters is the foundation. And before we do, I just want to share why we prioritize our health in earlier age, 30, 40, so that by the time you get to that average age of life expectancy, 70s, there's a few on this chat that are thriving. Welcome, they're in the program. I love it. You're still pretty high in this chart because you set yourself up for success. So you're maybe, if you were an athlete through your 30s and 40s, now your fitness level is the average for someone that's 30 or 40, and that's ultimately what we want to do is, we're going to decline a little bit with age, but making sure we're primed for a gradual decline. Okay. We don't want to be that person with a walker at 60, right, with 20 years of limited mobility. So this is the formula. Like I actually have an app and I've had the scans and all this stuff isn't great. It's cool to geek out on it. I'm going to suggest you don't need any of it and you can still make really successful progress here. But I do it because I'm curious and because it's the business right off. So here is an app that tracks my biological age. For the record, I'm turning 40 in a couple months. So it tells me I'm 28. How does it get that information? Well, it's a combination of things we're going to share. First up is your visceral fat. So that's the fat around the organs. If you've, really distended belly, Uncle Joe at the party that puts a beer on it and celebrates that, that's often a sign of high levels of visceral fat, which is linked to all sorts of issues. The aforementioned cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, inflammation, which can lead to, type 2 diabetes, and potentially hormonal imbalances too. So it's a cascade effect. So we want to keep that as low as possible. I would suggest you don't know without a DEXA scan, but you can safely get a pretty good estimate if all your belly fat is kind of grippable, right? It's just that stubborn stuff that's hanging on. It's not hard to the touch. Okay. So you want that, I think that 0.39 is where I'm at now. Good, could be lower, but to get this to 0 is a fallacy, but you just don't want it to be a 2 or above. Next up is VO2 max. So this is that test you can't easily do at home. It's where they put the actual mask on. You may have seen it in like the NHL combine with the athletes. It's your maximum oxygen uptake. So when you're running full blast, how much oxygen can your body utilize? How far can you push yourself before you break, kind of thing. Unfortunately, this is something that's pretty important. You want to be pushing your heart at least once or twice a week and often you can accomplish this through weight training, but where you're pushing yourself through conditioning is often the route most go, because you can reduce your risk of death by 50% if you're above average capacity for your age. So you can get the ranges online. You can do like a test at home. Just Google it. It won't be perfect, but at least they'll give you kind of a standard to strive for. Next up is heart age. So again, none of this is really anything you need to worry about tracking, but I have a ring that does this. So it predicts your cardiovascular age relative to your actual age. And it seems to line up with that 10-year number I've shared on the other metrics. Pulse wave velocity is how it tests through your finger. So how fast the wave flows through your arteries, and the slower, the better, as there's less stiffness to the artery that way. Don't obsess or get too worked up about that, but resting heart rate would be the one to look at. Okay, so look at the averages for your age. Hopefully you're falling in line with that. 41. For some reason, I'm almost dead when I'm resting. I guess it's good, but we don't need to strive for that either. Somewhere between 40 and 60 generally. Maybe a little bit higher for certain age groups. Heart rate variability, again, another metric that's kind of in the news these days, super popular. Don't get too worked up about that one. I don't think they know enough about it to conclusively say higher the better. Although an individual should track it if they have the capacity, because you can kind of see, okay, it's low today. I'm overtrained, under recovered. I need a rest day. Let's get that number back up. And if it's super, super low, heart's not functioning, at optimal capacity. But the older you get, the lower the number gets at baseline. Okay, one last thing to geek out on, then I'm going to get the actual stuff here. So I've been reading more on this Clotho, which is a protein discovered in 97 by Japanese researchers. So basically, the more your body produces this, the better off you'll be from a longevity perspective. The good news is all the stuff we have you recommend to do, exercise, working hard, strength training, eating right, tends to naturally increase your Clotho levels, okay? But science is coming out more and more on this. It's a good thing to have. The higher, the better, essentially. Okay, so don't get too caught up in that. It's basically your body's signal to maintain its muscle vitality. So the more you can trick it into, I need this muscle, I need my cardio output to be high, the better off you'll be. All right, so I just want to get that out of the way. That's how I track. That's how I can promise the number I have. Good news is you don't need to track any of this unless you're super into that kind of thing. We're going to actually share the actual steps to help you out. Brass tacks. Side note, where did brass tacks come from? I don't know the meaning behind this, but let's get down to brass tacks. I always think of that in my head when it's time to get down to business. So here we go. If you know, share in the chat, because I'd be curious to know the origins of that statement. Okay, 12 steps to motor through here. As promised, number one, big news here is move more. Try to train in all heart rate zones, but step one is just getting your step counts up, right? You may have seen this chart I shared the other day where there's a direct cause and effect. The more steps you take, the lower your risk of dying prematurely. It kind of levels off a bit here after 10,000, where you don't get quite the same bang for your buck as the previous every 1,000 you take. So the sweet spot, for time commitment wise, 8 to 10,000 a day is sort of that standard. If you're a little under one day, it's not a big deal. If you're well under, just work your way up. Okay, but aim and strive to be somewhere in that range. It's going to make a world of difference. 2 is kind of Captain Obvious, is avoid the harmful habits we know do our health no favors. So smoking, funny enough, it was kind of cool not too long ago, right? Some of you guys may remember. Every action star had a smoke in their hand, and we didn't really know the ramifications of that. Now we do, clearly linked to lung cancer, right? Moderate alcohol. I'm not saying I don't want to be a Debbie Downer during the summer and tell you you can't have a drink ever, but more and more research is showing if you're not a big drinker, you don't like it, don't. You're actually gonna be healthier than someone who even drinks moderately. Okay, but we're human. Our social life is connected to it. I would suggest trying to practice moderation and picking and choosing your battles around that. Preserve muscle and bone. Huge one, because frankly, we don't lose a ton of muscle. From 40 to 81, they've shown research that as long as you continue to train, you're not going to fall off a cliff in this regard. What happens often is the lack of activity. We move less, we eat less protein. We tend to make matters worse through our lifestyle choices. For a host of reasons, you can see this: low muscle mass and strength, higher risk of death, 63 times more likely in women, not as drastic in men, because men tend to have a little bit more muscle naturally, even without training. So it's largely preventable. That's good news. It's essentially the compound effect, right? Investing, you understand, the earlier you put money in, the bigger your returns later. The more you can invest in strength training, the better your returns later, when it really comes in handy having every ounce of muscle you need to not break a hip and function in your day-to-day life as long as possible. So this is a cool visual of a sedentary 74-year-old man and a 70-year-old triathlete still training. So it essentially looks like a flank steak, very little fat here in the bottom image, more of a ribeye or Wagyu, I guess is the popular one these days. Whole bunch of fat around the outer rim here, right? The muscle isn't as functional. Anytime there's fat interlaced with the muscle, that's not a powerful muscle. That's not a really functional, metabolically healthy one. So we want it to look as much like this as possible, as long as possible. And that's why we train and stay lean. Got it? Type a 1 in the chat if this is resonating so far. Here we are. Boom. Live crowd tonight. You guys are rocking. Good stuff, Kevin. So just to, you guys can screenshot this for later, but 30-year study, 50-plus-year-old men. So even if you're seeing all this compound interest talk and, oh, it's too late for me, they reintroduced exercise in their 50s. Basically, internally, they looked and felt 30 years younger. Okay. So never too late is essentially the take home, even though I said the sooner you start, the better. Just pick up a weight. It'll serve you well. All right, there's some ones, good stuff. So bone health. This is the next one. Obviously, the stronger your bones, the less likely they'll fracture, less likely you'll end up in the hospital later in life, falling off your bike or whatever the case may be. So this, again, is through our DEXA scan. So you can't get this kind of measurement without, but I can safely say if you're strength training, your protein is high, your T-score is going to be quite healthy if you've been doing it consistently for a while. So the problem with this is being anything below 0. Generally, your risk factor goes up, 6 times, 10x. Balance. Okay, ignore this graphic. That's my scores. This is something I have worked on since getting this full body scan because my balance, particularly the vestibular system, like inner eye when your eyes are closed, was not good. Everything was pretty strong in my test except this. So I've worked diligently on this. I can share some exercises for you, but one is to, in a safe place, try balancing on one foot and then balance on one foot with your eyes closed. So have something that you can grab onto if need be for a safe landing. If you can hold that for 10 plus seconds, your vestibular balance is quite strong. That's difficult to do. As soon as your eyes are closed, your equilibrium is off, right? So I can send you some exercises if you want to work on that. But yeah, it definitely is linked to brain health too. So I was worried when I saw my numbers not great here. Grip strength, another one. Massive factor in longevity. Just obvious. The stronger you are, the more likely you're going to be able to battle off certain things, or if you get a disease, you can fight it off. So you generally work this without, you don't need those little grip things my dad used to use back in the day. You can get plenty of grip strength just from training with weights without like wraps and having to hold that weight. Dumbbell in your hand, it's going to be just fine. And then your forearm strength as well. So this is where everyone starts, but it is only one piece of the puzzle, is like mental stimulation, right? Especially after retirement, you're not working day to day, having to deal with all the problems of your job. So you can get, it's one of those things, if you don't use it, you lose it again. So finding things you enjoy, that challenge you, that goes beyond crosswords and puzzles to pickleball, like paddle sports, like having to use your brain to actually match up with the ball. Like that is powerful stuff for your brain as well. Don't overlook this one. I think there's more and more, the science community is even coming on board with this, that the more social you are, the better your relationships, the more connections you have day to day, week to week, the healthier you'll be mentally and physically. Okay. So try your best to, get out of the house and participate. Sometimes it can be virtual. This can work effectively too. But a good balance of both, ideally. I think this goes without saying. Positive people live longer. Practicing gratitude. We had our mindset coach on last week talking about having like a brag book, like making sure you're focusing on your wins, not just your losses, dwelling on the negative. Try to find the positive in your day, and that builds momentum for more positive, not just outcomes, but your mindset and your beliefs, what you're thinking leads to positive actions, leads to positive outcomes, right? Not being too hard on yourself. I think that's a big one for us, is letting that voice in your head dictate how you should feel. All right, rolling along. Regular health screenings. So I know men in particular don't ever go to the doctor, but ideally you're getting blood work done every 6 months. I mean, if you're my age, maybe you can get away with once a year, but the older you are, the more likely you are going in quarterly or at least a couple times a year. Just ask for a routine blood work, right? Because that will at least give you a picture, a snapshot of what's inside at that particular time. And it goes without saying, their vaccinations were created for a reason. The big, major diseases that used to run over the world are no longer a factor because we get our vax. Biochemistry. So this is blood work. So this is my test. So what they look at is your cholesterol levels, LDL, HDL. LDL is the bad one. So you want to keep that in range. HDL is the good one. You want to keep that above the range. One is sort of the baseline for that. Kidney function. So the big one there is EGFR, making sure that's normal. Creatinine is another test for kidney function. That can be misleading in those who have higher than average muscle or strength training within 48 hours of the test. So keep that in mind. Sometimes there can be a bit of a false positive there, and your doctor will be none the wiser. I'm always high. This is the first time I've been in range on that one, but I've had the kidney scans and everything to put my doctor at ease, and sure enough, everything was fine. So EGFR is generally more accurate. Liver function, that's down here, AST, ALT, having those in range, usually positive. And blood sugar, A1C, right? That's the most critical one. Glucose random too. So essentially that, if we always like to see blood work of our members just to kind of, especially if they're dealing with something in particular, just to rule out anything beneath the hood that might be limiting our results. So if someone's low energy, for example, we'll have them check their iron, B12, maybe vitamin D2, but often it's the iron is the bigger one in women in particular, making sure that's in range. If not, supplement or eat more red meat. All right, hematology is the other piece that we look at. That's just everything to do with the heart, red blood cell count, hemoglobin. Hematocrit is the one that if it's high, that could be at risk for like a heart attack and stroke. So we keep monitoring that. And I would definitely suggest you look at that with your doctor as well. All right, next up, sleep. I think this is probably another Captain Obvious here, but like I said, the foundation works best. Managing your sleep, prioritizing it. The shorter your sleep, the shorter your life was a quote I saw, Matthew Walker. I think there's some merit to that. Sleep when you're dead. I don't believe that's good advice. You have the odd day where you can power through, but we all know how we feel when we don't get it. The next day is never as good as it is when we're well rested. So long list of reasons, send irrational text to your coach when the scale is up a pound, often related to sleep deprivation. So keep that in mind. Give yourself some grace. Try to nap, or what I call yoga nidra, which is like you're not actually sleeping, but it's a good way of like resetting. You get a bit of a boost from it, even if you haven't slept your prerequisite 7+ hours a night. It does burn calories indirectly, meaning after a poor night's sleep, we tend to be snackier and we tend to move less. And we're not fully in control, but that's your body's kind of defense mechanism because it's sensing a state of stress, right? So please make it a priority. Do your best. You'll never have perfect nights all the time, but it lays the foundation for sure. And there's a long study here that showed consistent sleep may cut your risk of heart failure by 42% in the UK, mind you, but over 400,000 people. There's some real merit to that. Last one is optimized hormones. So what is that? Well, that's your thyroid, your sex hormones, estrogen, more so for women, testosterone for men. It's definitely not my realm of expertise. And at a certain point in life, you may want to consider one of these two avenues, right? HRT for women or TRT for men. Again, I can't state this enough. Not my area of expertise. I don't suggest going down this road unless you've exhausted all your natural options, but it can be a lifesaver in the right scenarios too. And it can be a real governor on your results if something's really in a bad spot hormonally and you haven't addressed it, right? So that your doctor will often identify these things in your blood work anyway and refer you to an endo. All right. Just on that point though, I do like some natural additions to support healthy hormones. Vitamin D, yes, from the sun ideally. Just don't burn. Don't be out for long periods midday, but 5 minutes of a little bit of sun exposure does the body good. I know that might be controversial, but then lather on the sunscreen afterwards. But vitamin D, we don't get enough of it this time of year, or sorry, in this climate, but this time of year is your time to do it. And then potentially supplement over the winter months. Get blood work to rule out that it's actually low in the first place, though. Magnesium is one of my must-haves for everybody for stress reduction. It does support healthy hormonal health indirectly. It also helps with regular bowel movements, which I think is pretty important for all of us as well. So something to at least consider before bed. 1 or 2, like glycinate, but citrate's the cheapest version and it works fine. Just don't get the oxide, right? That's what they give to people before colon cleanse to really clean you out, which we don't want. We just want nice regular movements here. And then boron is the one, particularly for men. If your testosterone is low, but you don't qualify for TRT, but you feel like the symptoms of low testosterone, your mood, your energy is starting to lack, experiment with this. This is a member's testosterone levels after supplementing. Free testosterone, which is the really one that matters, was quite high. And that was certainly having a benefit on his quality of life, libido and otherwise. All right. Any questions? Drop them in the chat. Type a 2 for all systems go to move on from that. Hopefully you've taken some quick notes on that. We'll certainly get the replay out with those 12 tips. But that, if there's nothing else you take from this, I would certainly encourage you to start to implement a few of those from the list if you haven't already. Got some 2s coming in, good stuff. Beautiful. Okay. So what maybe matters for our longevity, our quality of life is, I should say, I forgot to put this slide in. It matters far more that you exercise regularly and you maintain a healthy weight, right? Healthy body fat, because none of these things are, these are the things people tend to focus on and they're majoring in the minors until they get that other stuff where it needs to be. Okay. So that's my disclaimer. But you may have seen this headline in May: microplastics found in testicles. Oh my, shock and awe, scary, right? Microplastics are everywhere. We don't really know the impact, however, but there is some science emerging that could affect fertility. If you're in that stage of life where you're hoping to have kids, you may want to reduce your exposure. I'll share some tips for that. But, you know, plastics in a lot of things, to expect to eliminate it 100%, unlikely. And I don't want you to have scare tactics around it either, because we just don't know enough. But we do know, like, long-term exposure to air pollution, bad, likely fine in a smaller city like Winnipeg. You're not over in China where there's a bunch of, you know, smog in the air. Water contaminants we know are hard to avoid. People are flushing things down the toilet or in our lake water in small doses. Likely, unlikely an issue. You can get like a Brita filter that hopefully will take some of it out, but we're still going to get some. So I'm going to suggest a strategy remedy for that. And then household chemicals, you know, like cleaners, toxic cleaners, plastics, even like canned drinks, a little bit is fine, but they do have BPA in it, which has been shown to disrupt our hormonal health and cancer risks and so on. So unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of this stuff is there, and businesses, you know, they're running on profit. They're not going to always make the best choices for, you know, health and wellness of people buying their products. That's the reality. But the truth is, I share this picture because you could go direct to the farmer, get milk in a glass jar and think you've got it all covered. But they've taken the milk out with a device that has plastic that's warmed up. So you're likely getting some microplastics in the milk anyway. So the reality is it's nearly impossible to avoid your exposure to plastics entirely. But what can you do is try to avoid like plastic Tupperware. It's like cut up and you reheat things in it and it gets more pliable. That's not ideal. That could seep into the foods you're eating. So use glass Tupperware. You know, if you're reheating things, certainly try to avoid any sort of plastic exposure. Plastic water bottles, I think it's good that they've really started to weed these out, but use more of a, you know, Stanley mug or, you know, any of those metal mugs that aren't plastic based, because nanoplastics are in, and they've tested it in water bottles that come from the store, like in the thousands. So your best bet is to try to avoid those as best you can. And frankly, sweat as much as possible. That's your body's natural detox. So they've shown like circulating BPA levels were reduced greatly by sauna and strength training and sweating through cardio. So by default, you're probably giving yourself a good buffer by exercising, doing the right things. Teflon pan, if it's new, it's probably fine. But if it's like chipped up and you're reheating things, those little micro pieces could be in your food. You're consuming them. They could be in your body forever, right? So cast iron, if you can get it, especially if your iron levels are low, you can actually get a little bit of a boost from using those. And then chemical-free clothing. I unfortunately don't know the answer on that one. I just know there's been some reports in the news of like tight-fitting yoga pants having plastics in them. Sure enough, that's what contributes to circulating plastic. So that's the short list. Don't obsess about it, though, I would suggest. We just don't know enough, but I would say it's probably a good idea to reduce your exposure to plastics in general. On that same lines, like stress less about things, because the more chronic stress you have, the more you increase your risk for all those things above. Even if you're doing a lot of the right behaviors, if you're chronically stressed and underslept, you're going to be putting yourself in a tough spot to live long and healthy, right? So another obvious one. So in summary for this section, so reduce your chemical plastic exposure as best you can, like natural cleaning products, filter your drinking water, minimize the plastic water bottles, that kind of thing, manage your stress, and then sweat, because that'll often help your body rid yourself of these toxins in the first place. All good? Any questions? Probably losing my voice here. That's a 2. Okay, that was from previous. All right, moving on then to the bonus section here on how to avoid summer weight gain without giving up beer or brats. Bratwurst. Brats sounded better. So what to drink if you're in a situation where you want to partake, how much to eat, whether maintain or potentially lose weight through the next 6-8 weeks. So I've shared this before, so this might be repeat information for some, but I like the idea of flux dieting during the summer months. So that means matching your calorie intake to your social calendar. So let's say 2,000 calories is your goal for the day over the course of a week. You can structure it in a way where you have a couple lower days balanced out by a couple higher days. You know, maybe you go to the lake, you want to partake in a bit more calories, liquid or otherwise. You've got yourself 500 extra those days that you're going to balance out through those 3 lower days. So bird's eye view, it just looks kind of like this. If you're tracking your intake bonus, you don't necessarily have to track on those 2 of the higher days, but you still have to be sort of within reason. It's not a complete off the deep end binge, right? If you're looking to maintain or lose for the next 2 weeks anyway. All right. So that's how it looks. A few key points, though, is to make sure protein is prioritized still. It's going to keep you full, reduce those cravings, certainly support the training you guys are likely doing. And I would suggest including a source with every meal. And front loading it. If you're going somewhere for a meal, like have your shake or a salad in the first part of the day, so you're mostly at your daily total already, and then you can fill the gaps with carbs and fats at the dinner out or party or wherever you're going to. This is a good tip year round, but try to avoid distractions like watching a scary show with a bunch of food in front of you. You're going to snack almost on autopilot. Trying to be present at mealtime. It's kind of a lost art in today's busy world, but it does go a long way. You get that cue that you're full a lot sooner. Okay. Excellent. Stay active. It goes without saying, you can negate a lot of the calories from eating a little bit heavier by being outside, moving more. If you're at the lake, getting in the water and swimming, going for little hikes, playing a sport, all that stuff adds up. I still like people to strength train, but it can be shorter duration, even 10-minute mini workouts have their place. And you'll just feel better too once you return to your routine. You won't get that crippling soreness that you get if you take 2-3 weeks off completely. Not to say you can't, but Ideally, you're kind of maintaining at least. Okay. At social events, the idea being is still try to practice some moderation, build up on the good stuff first on your plate. There's always protein at these things, not maybe the most quality, but protein and produce, the salads, and then fill the gaps with the fun stuff, right? Share dessert or try to have smaller portions. Easy to say, hard to do, but that's why we potentially suggest having that buffer to have some higher calorie days. All right. Excuse me. Plan ahead. Last but not least, if you're going to a restaurant, there's nothing to stop you from looking at that menu ahead of time. Nutrition facts are online nowadays or in the apps. It takes a couple minutes. And you can pick an option, even if it's a higher calorie option, and build the rest of your day around that, the work back method. So if you know where you're headed, a couple minutes, forward thinking is going to help you make a better choice in the moment, but also, structure your day around that. So you're not just piling things on with reckless abandon. You can screenshot this or watch the replay. This is the short list of alcoholic beverages that come in a little lower calorie. Bear in mind, alcohol itself has 7 calories per gram. So even just a shot of tequila has almost 100 calories, right? So it does add up pretty fast. So practice moderation. That's still the name of the game here. Okay, awesome. Firehouse, wake you up. Any big takeaways so far? What is resonating? What's I want you to write something now that you're actually going to action and go tomorrow, if not tonight, and implement, because it's going to make a massive difference for you if you actually action the information. Because as we know, information is fairly useless without implementation. That's often the missing piece for all of us. So I challenge you to do that.
I just find that the mindfulness, in this, to handle stress is always difficult because everything moves so fast now. So I find it hard to slow down, and I really don't want to slow down, but I'm usually stressed a lot, but
that's partly dictated by our society, right? Like, meal times getting me away from my busyness, my productivity, my work. But there's something to be said for like trying to slow down and disconnect from the devices and just be present with the meal. And there's so much benefit to that. We've all lost our way with that for sure. Kevin says, already implementing the weights, walks, elliptical, diabetic friendly diet. Good stuff. So what aren't you implementing? You based it all. Anything that you can include. That's a good sign that you've I know you mentioned that in our chat that you've really turned over a leaf recently. So good for you. I like it.
Sleep. Oh.
Sleep piece, yeah. Yeah, that can unravel all your good actions. So making, we can't fully control our sleep sometimes. I can attest to that. But the sooner you get in a better place, the better off you'll be. All right, just a segue now. We have several members on the call, and I'd like to actually maybe one or two to speak to our process, because I think this is an important message is we all generally know what to do, but a lot of us don't have proof that we know what to do. We don't actually implement, right? So what is the missing link? Well, in my experience, the golden ticket is that accountability to another human being. And that's why I've personally hired a coach for a year now, because I've gone without a coach for the better part of 2024. I had a bad bout of insomnia in January that trickled into the earlier months, and I put kind of a hold on my own fitness a bit. And sure enough, I've kind of gained some weight and gone the wrong direction, right? I'm not in a bad spot, but I could be better. So the first thing I do is offload the programming and decision fatigue that comes with this to someone else. So I'm a big believer in this piece for myself personally. Some can manage okay on their own, but they'll do better often. It's like the difference between a speedboat across the ocean versus trying to paddle across on some unsturdy kayak on your own. So Dan, just since you unmuted, if you don't mind, since you're not afraid to chat, question for you is, you've obviously been in the program a while, lost some weight. What were you like struggling with beforehand, before we started though? That's kind of where people are at, is they're not sure where to start. So what was kind of the biggest challenges you faced that we kind of helped you navigate?
What, when I first started,
Yeah.
it was really keeping track of what I was eating, and not using the app, which was the one that's online, is really, really helpful to see where I'm going overboard, and also to see how my exercise is helping when I'm using that app, because it's yeah. So I just think that the whole program's great. I mean, it's really working well for me. Of course, I wish it would work faster, but that's not the answer. Uh,
No, I won't share
it
your age,
takes
but you're
time.
crushing
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You're
But
coaching.
I guess it's just a matter of like I've said before, is that everyone says, "Oh my God, you've lost so much weight," and I'm sort of like, I have not. Like I'm really still out there, but it's getting better. I mean, I must admit the classes and that have been great. So, you know,
Yeah, and there's something we said for not just scale watching, right? Body recomposition, gaining muscle is such a critical part to the process. That won't be reflected on the scale.
yeah,
So, I think there's been a good chunk of that for you personally too.
yes, yes.
So what
Yeah.
would you say to someone that's like struggling right now, not sure where to start? Like what would get them off the fence? Like what would be your advice to that person who's in your shoes?
Well, to get a coach, because you really can't do it alone. I mean, I've tried a million times doing it alone. It doesn't work. You need somebody that's going to be at you all the time, and giving you strong advice, good advice, and sticking to the plan. People want it to happen within a month, lose 50 pounds. It just doesn't work, because you put it
Mm,
all back on again.
yeah.
So I've had that happen too. So,
Love it, Diane.
hmm?
Yeah. I didn't pay you to say that, but I appreciate that. I mean, that's certainly,
Yeah, yeah,
it's one thing to be motivated for 2, 3 weeks on your own, right? But you hit a sticking point or you feel
yeah,
like you're stuck and you quit and you get in that, vicious
yeah,
cycle, just
yeah.
yo-yo. And if you have a check-in every week with somebody,
If anything gets me off of having ice cream every day or chocolate covered pretzels, which I haven't had either for like since just before I started this program.
yeah, that's this fun.
And I'm not missing it, believe it or not.
I love it. That's what we like.
Yeah. I
Great.
must say one thing on your slides is the one where you show the different drinks and the calories. You're missing wine.
Yes. There's
Very
champagne on
important. Wine's
there.
very important. Okay. That's it for
Yes, yes. I agree. Red wine's pretty high calorie, but yeah. You can get away with that, no problem. I'll add that for next time. Thanks for sharing
me.
your
Yes.
thoughts,
Oh,
man. Appreciate it. So quickly, for those who are not currently members, exploring their options, just want to whip through this and give you a unique opportunity at the end with a bit of a bundle we have included. So this is what it looks like inside. Everyone's got the data nowadays. The technology is out there to track your nutrition and your workouts and your body weight and all the things I mentioned off the top. But it's another thing to actually, implement a plan consistently enough for long enough to get the outcome you actually want. And that's where the human support comes in, and try to merge the two. And that's really what we've built our foundation, our plan on, is having not just me in your corner, but a community, whether it's the dads or moms group. Like there's a lot of support within the community itself, with me, with our coaches. And yes, we do promise good results in those first 90 days, but this is often secondary to laying the foundation, getting a system that works, and making this the last program you ever need. Because you've lost weight before and you've gained it back. Why? I think you've been missing a few of these elements, particularly the support group, sort of having a back end maintenance phase that you can transition out of afterwards. Because you can't diet forever, but you can't just blow your plan completely after you've hit your goal either, or else you've seen what happens, you gain back the weight. So with that said, the bonus now, because it's summer, there's a lot of extra incentive to join because most people wait for September. So I have my smash in case of emergency. This is a rapid 14-day reset. So some additional advanced tools to help you lose, get some quick wins, lose 5+ pounds. 4 free weeks. So if you sign up before August 7th, you get the summer free, the rest of summer free. We're doing another 6-week challenge. I know a lot of you were in that last one within the program. a 75 sane challenge, we called it. This one will be a little bit different, starting in late August, early September, to get you into a group with something to check off each day, really motivate you to take the next step. And then a VIP session 1-to-1 if you're local here in Winnipeg, where you'll meet with me. We'll go through your diet with fine tooth comb, set you up with an intro workout. So that's for the first 3 only. Okay. Oh, I forgot to put these in. So this is what you get. Custom nutrition and training program, a lift-off call in the first 3 days, go through the plan, make sure you're fully engaged and ready. Every week we have what we call midweek momentum, just a group call, myself and my associate coach, Abby. Mindset Matters call. This becomes a monthly session with Gavin. I pay him a king's ransom to come in and talk to you guys about mainly the stuff between the ears, binge eating, self-sabotage, what's holding you back, all the deep stuff that makes all the difference. And then we do have 2 live virtual workouts each week. Every 90 days, we kind of game plan, workshop your goals. And then, like I said before, we have these mini challenges where you're part of a smaller group and we sprint to your success. All right. And then every Monday, I send a newsletter out with my biggest takeaways. What am I learning currently from my mentors? And I try to pass that on to you guys. And then lots of fun stuff here. What will it cost? Well, it might cost you $0. Not even factoring in the life savings, pun intended. We might potentially save your life. But this is where we found, it was actually surprising to me back in April 2022. We pulled 20 members, comparing their credit card statements before CalFit to after, and significant savings. Why? Well, there's less impulse to go to a restaurant, order delivery. In some cases, it adds up 2, 3, 4 times a week. Alcohol, we try to reduce your intake of that. We get your grocery bill down because you're making more informed choices. You go in with a plan and you don't get, sucked into what they're trying to sell you on the ends of the aisles. Okay. And generally Starbucks runs are reduced as well. So it comes out to that. Everyone's different. Your results may vary on that, but I would suggest this should pay for your coaching in a lot of ways. All right. So if interested, we do this by application only. Now, we only offer a free fitness assessment as our first step. And if neither of us wants to move forward, no problem, right? That's the idea with this, is just to give you some value off the top, give you some certainty. It's not a program that's just off the shelf that is packaged the same for everybody. We try to customize it to you. So that's what that calls for. So you can schedule that in there with the link in the chat. I added the HTTPS. There you go. Excellent. And then we gift you a copy of my book when you complete your assessment. So hopefully everyone has this as a member. If not, let me know. And then if nothing else, start with this, Metabolism Jumpstart. It's free on my website. Go there. It gives you sort of a worksheet and a checklist, and then a couple follow-up emails to start to implement this stuff on your own. And no harm done if that's all the action you take to start this process. Good. Questions? I know we're about at our time. I don't even know what time it is, but hopefully you guys have gotten value out of this. We'll shoot over the replay likely tomorrow morning to those that registered, since a lot weren't able to attend live, but you guys will get it as well. No questions. I did such a good job explaining myself, right, Melissa? 2 thumbs up. Love it. Awesome, Ray. Appreciate you guys. All right, we'll let you get off back to your summer vacations. Any questions, obviously reach out to me personally. Mitch@mitchcalvert.com is my email. Or a lot of you guys can hit me up in the app. Cheers. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mitch.
Have a good rest of your night.
Night.